Baroness Butler-Sloss.
I'm enormously relieved, my lords, that the House is not adjourning, because I do wish to say something about that small country, Gibraltar. Today is Commonwealth Day, a suitable occasion to discuss one of our members who has long-standing and continuing problems as a result of the bullying, illegal tactics of its neighbour Spain. I'm a member of the Anglo-Gibraltar Parliamentary Group, and I have been visiting Gibraltar for over 60 years. In September last year, I attended with other parliamentarians the Gibraltar National Day in Casemates Square. It was an occasion of great enthusiasm, with a vast number of Union Jacks waved by the crowd who packed the square. At one side, there was an enormous television screen, and we had a video speech from the Prime Minister. He pledged that Gibraltar was British and would always be so. I left Gibraltar feeling that our government was in every way totally behind this small outpost of Britishness. His speech sent a powerful message to Spain. The Prime Minister was right to do so. As the House knows, Gibraltar has been British for centuries. It also sits at a strategically important point as the gateway between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. It is important to NATO, the EU, and wider global interests. Members of the Gibraltar Regiment serve alongside other British troops and also take part in peacekeeping operations authorised by NATO, the EU, and the UN. It is the only UK overseas territory to be part of the EU, and its membership dates from the moment the UK joined the EU. It is important to remember that its unique status is defined by Article 355 of the Treaty of Accession. Further, since the implementation of the Maastricht Treaty in 1993, Gibraltarians are in the same way as other British and Spanish nationals European citizens. On the 20th of January this year, I listened to questions on Gibraltar responded to by the noble lady, the Minister, here today from the FCO. Her question showed action by the government in various ways, such as speaking to the Spanish ambassador, the Spanish Minister for Europe, the Deputy Prime Minister, and our Prime Minister to the Spanish Prime Minister. Putting it bluntly, raising the subject of Gibraltar with Spanish ministers is great, as far as it goes, but where so far has it got Gibraltar? During her answers, the noble lady, the Minister, said, and I quote from Hansard, "However, our strategy at this stage is very clear: to de-escalate the situation and to try to resolve these matters through diplomatic and political routes." I pose the question to the Minister: with what success? I am also somewhat concerned about the use of the word de-escalate. I understood the British policy over Gibraltar is to maintain the status quo. The word de-escalate means to me a degree of stepping back, and may be so understood by Spain. I do hope the Minister can reassure me that she did not mean to step back, but does really intend to preserve the status quo. According to a written answer by an FCO Minister in the other place, Mr. Lidington, on the 4th of March, there have been 498 incursions by Spanish state vessels into Gibraltar territorial waters during 2013, but 77 this year up to the 28th of February, of which 53 were the Guardia Civil. There appears to be no let-up as a result of the diplomatic and political efforts of the United Kingdom government. Last week, the Foreign Affairs Committee of the other place held a meeting in Gibraltar, at which the Chief Minister gave evidence. I look forward to reading the report of that committee. And if I may respectfully say so, the Foreign Affairs Committee is to be congratulated for going to Gibraltar and seeing on the ground for itself what is happening. I do not know when a minister of this government last went to Gibraltar, or how often a minister has been there during the nearly 4 years of this government. But it would seem to me that a minister's visit to Gibraltar would send a powerful signal to the Spanish government, which plainly it is not yet receiving, that this government takes Gibraltar issue truly seriously. The speech of the Prime Minister last September was excellent, but that was given from 10 Downing Street. Regular visits to Gibraltar by ministers would give an even more powerful message that Spain-Gibraltar issue was taken genuinely seriously by our government. We have to demonstrate publicly to Spain and the rest of the EU that it is high on the government agenda, otherwise it will not be taken as an important issue across Europe. The Chief Minister of Gibraltar, in his briefing to me, says the UK is not effective in the diplomatic action it has taken. He recognises the increasingly robust use of language by ministers, but is understandably frustrated by the present situation. He raises the point that Spain continues to say that relations with Britain are excellent despite Gibraltar. Ought not that assertion be challenged? Not only has the situation not improved on the ground, but also the ad hoc talks have not been resumed, so no discussions are taking place. There is a number of obvious issues where Gibraltar is being threatened and damaged by the unlawful and unfair behaviour of Spain, and I will refer to 4. The incursion of Spanish state ships, particularly it would seem to me those of the Guardia Civil, present the real possibility of an altercation that gets out of hand with consequences. On the 5th of March, there was in one day 9 incursions into British Gibraltar waters, 7 of which were by the Guardia Civil, and on the 6th of March, again 9 incursions, 4 from the Guardia Civil, 1 from the Spanish Navy, and on both days, several from the Maritime Agency. I'm told that the response of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to these incursions is made weeks after the event, whereas one inadvertent incursion of a British ship into Spanish waters was the subject of a complaint by Spain within a few hours, 6 hours, I believe. Surely we should equal the swift response of Spain. If we do not, there's a real danger that our protests may not be taken seriously if they are so low-key. One of the most important issues is the interruption of free movement within the EU by the obstructions at the Spanish-Gibraltar frontier, obviously under instruction via Cadiz from Madrid. This affects tourists, those who live in Spain and work in Gibraltar, and those doing business on both sides of the border. The tourist industry of Gibraltar has been badly affected, and I understand there's been a 44% reduction in visitors and a 26% reduction in the number of non-Gibraltarian cars crossing the frontier. The average waiting time this year for pedestrians is between 1 hour and an hour and a half. Pedestrians crossing the border into Spain are met by crack Spanish anti-terrorist officers armed with machine guns. Goodness sake, for ordinary pedestrians. Vehicles crossing with 5 available lanes, 5, took at the beginning of March an average of 93 minutes, up to 110 minutes to cross, and since then an average of 70 minutes to get across. It is a serious and continuing breach of the right of free movement provided across the whole of the European Union, a state of affairs which is entirely unacceptable and should be so seen by all member states. La Linea and other local areas of southern Spain are also being damaged. Approximately 10,000 Spanish workers in Gibraltar. There could be more, but I gather the mayor of La Linea has been told that her town has to suffer for the greater good of Spain. The third issue is aviation. In 2006, there was a trilateral forum for dialogue which created the Cordoba Agreement. This included Gibraltar Airport within European law and civil aviation. Spain is now seeking to exclude Gibraltar Airport from the automatic application of EU law. The measures affected are 4. The European Parliament is debating the motions. At the moment, there are 4 Spanish amendments being debated there. The most important, perhaps, is the EU Air Passenger Rights Regulation. The European Parliament debated that first measure last month and voted the Gibraltar exclusion clause out of the legislation. The matter now goes to the European Council. It's crucial that the United Kingdom gets the maximum support to defeat the Spanish efforts. Ordinary people should be enjoying Gibraltar Airport as nationals of the European Union. The fourth issue is bunkering. The Spanish have now created bunkering facilities and shore facilities in Algeciras and are apparently suggesting that they will prosecute and fine anyone who goes into bunkering facilities in the Gibraltar waters. Understandably, this is affecting ship owners who don't want to go in for the expensive and costly procedures there might be, even though this is clearly unlawful, and surely it is anti-competition. But it will have a hugely negative effect upon Gibraltar. The EU Commission sent a team of experts to Gibraltar last September. I understand the Spanish Commission wrote to the EU Commission wrote to the Spanish government, setting out the findings of the experts and detailing the findings and observations of the delays at the border, and it made recommendations. Has our government seen the letter? May we know the recommendations? May we know the response of Spain and how it can be monitored, and what further examination can be expected by the EU and the UK? My last question to the Minister is, how far is our government seeking support from other members of the EU to put pressure on the Spanish government over these unacceptable infringements of EU law?
My Lords, I'm deeply saddened that in Spain, just as in Argentina, Prime Ministers and Presidents alike, in deep economic and therefore political trouble, seek by diversionary tactics to raise with their electorates alleged threats by foreigners. Indeed, over this weekend, a very senior European foreign affairs figure with no interest in either the United Kingdom nor Spain told me that it's possible to exactly correlate Spain's recently renewed activities against Gibraltar with the emergence of the corruption scandals in the Spanish government not long ago. The two correlate. So, just as the President of Argentina routinely issues daft and pathetic threats against the Falklands, so in recent years the Prime Minister of Spain has authorised deliberate incursions into Gibraltarian waters, as outlined by the noble lady in her commanding speech, the figures that she gave, whilst political amnesia leads him to forget the ambiguity that Spain actually has two much contested exclaves of their own just across the Straits of Gibraltar on the North African coast at Ceuta and Melilla, surrounded by Morocco. Spain does this now, these incursions, these interruptions with the lawful behaviour of people on Gibraltar, in a concerted campaign to the United Kingdom, one of its allies, my lords, a fellow NATO member. Indeed, in Spain they are today making bits of kit that go into the Eurofighter sent to Lancashire to be assembled there. It is an extraordinary reflection on Spain itself. Please, I asked my noble friend the Minister, what kind of ally is Spain? For only last week, on Wednesday the 5th of March, as the noble Baroness has already referred to, at the Foreign Affairs Committee in another place, I heard the First Minister of Gibraltar outlined what he termed Spain's bullying tactics, ranging from all those lengthy border delays, and indeed, on one occasion, the breaking an entry into a British diplomatic bag. In the old days, a gunboat would have been sent to deal with that kind of thing at the frontier, to much more shocking incursions into territorial waters, the worst being on the 18th of February last, 2014 that is, by a Spanish state vessel that sailed into British Gibraltar waters and disrupted an important Royal Navy exercise involving some of our Special Forces personnel from the Royal Navy Submarine Parachute Assistance Group. A disgraceful act. This must stop. I'd like to ask my noble friend the Minister, on that occasion, was the Spanish ambassador immediately summoned into the Foreign and Commonwealth Office? And if not, why not? Royal Naval vessels, by comparison, have entered into or passed through the waters claimed by Spain around its two North African exclaves, to which I have already referred, over the last 15 years on precisely two occasions. The first was by invitation back in 1999 when HMS Herald paid a port visit to the Spanish exclave on North Africa, just across the Straits of Gibraltar, to Melilla. The second was when in August 2013, HMS Montrose exercised its lawful right of passage through the Straits of Gibraltar off Ceuta en route to the eastern Mediterranean. The score of incursions is several thousand to one, as far as I can see from the figures that the noble lady has given. No beating about the diplomatic bush from me, my lords. It seems to me we behave impeccably. It seems to me that the Spanish behave disgracefully in this respect. I would like to ask my noble friend, the Minister, why the United Kingdom does not raise the Gibraltar issue at the next NATO Council, for I think these Spanish claims and incursions are the only current examples of belligerence by one NATO member against another in the whole list of 28 member nations, setting aside, that is, the long-running saga, what's followed after the Turks invaded Cyprus. Gibraltar's population wished by an overwhelming majority in the last referendum in 2002 to maintain the status quo. That population of 30,000 is approximately 10 times the size of the population of the Falklands, who feel exactly the same, my lords. So I do welcome the apparent strong support of Her Majesty's government for the status quo. I just wish that Spain and the Argentine would indeed, and I borrow a phrase, grow up and get over it all soon, and that their leaders will rather pay proper and effective attention to their own economies and appalling unemployment with the social unrest that follows in both their countries that they're both experiencing, rather than trying to disrupt endlessly the life of a friendly neighbour. It is, my lords, what shocking accusation I'm about to make. Very un-European behaviour.
Could I say that I'm so pleased that the noble Baroness has raised the issue of Gibraltar, because, like has been said, I'm appalled at the behaviour of Spain in relation to it. And there are so many things whenever you get up, and I declare an interest. I've been to Gibraltar many times. I'm a friend of Gibraltar. Indeed, I have the freedom of Gibraltar. Well, I'm always puzzled as to why our government doesn't take a firmer attitude towards them. And I want to outline 2 or 3 things that are troubling Gibraltar at the moment. One has been referred by the Baroness in relation to the EU passenger rights. The Spanish government unilaterally abandoned the trilateral forum for dialogue, and they are seeking, as has been said, to exclude Gibraltar Airport from the application of European law. Now, I think it's absolutely essential that any EU citizen going to Gibraltar has the same rights as when they use airports anywhere else within Europe. So why should Gibraltar be different? And what I want to emphasise is what has been asked of the Minister, and this is this. Are we at the moment, because this is going to be debated, as has been said, by the European Council in June, what are we doing to lobby other people within Europe before that meeting to ensure that they support us in making sure that they remove the exclusion of Gibraltar? That is essential. Are we taking steps? What are we doing? And I'd be very pleased to hear from the Minister when she replies on that matter. The second one I want to talk about is something that is affects Gibraltar and affects us as well, and that is that they are the world's leading remote gambling jurisdiction. The 26 licence orders that they got in Gibraltar, just to emphasise the effect that could have on the economy, they provide 3,000 jobs and account for 25% of the economy. Now, we're not discussing tonight, and I don't want to go into any detail about it, the Gambling Licence and Exclusion Bill, but nevertheless, it could have a disastrous effect upon Gibraltar. It would lead, and that's not good, I don't think, for this country as well, to remote gambling with the bill, because there will be many, many more licenses applied for. There'll be many people in this country, and as I say, the effect will be not to strengthen it, it will be to weaken it. But while it could cause us problems here. It's certainly, as far as Gibraltar is concerned, it would be an absolute disaster. And now I want to turn to something that has been raised again, and that is the problem at the borders. They still continue. They still continue to delay, and we've heard the delays that are going on in relation to them. Delays of up to over an hour are quite common, longer than that are most common. And it is having an effect on the economy of Gibraltar. Not only that, it has its effect, as been mentioned, on the thousands of Spanish workers who cross over and actually work in Gibraltar. They're experiencing these difficulties daily because of the attitude. Now, what are we going to do about it? And anyone who's been to Gibraltar, and the Noble Baroness remarked on it, will know that the number of British citizens residing in Spain who come over the border to shop in Gibraltar, they come to the supermarkets there, but they're being prevented from doing this. And yet, what are we doing in relation to it? And I now go on to the other matter that has been raised, and that is about the incursions into British territorial waters. Could I read to you something that a written question that was replied to me, and I put down the question asking about the important exercise, and I said, what response have they received from the government of Spain about the disruption of the Royal Naval parachute exercise, British territorial waters off Gibraltar, on the 18th of February? The answer I received from the Minister who was replying tonight was the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, the Right Honourable Foreign Secretary, raised his concerns about these illegal incursions. I emphasise the matter: illegal incursions by by Spanish state vessels into British Gibraltar territorial waters, with the Spanish Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs on the 20th of February. We continue to protest formally at illegal excursions. It has been said tonight. That was made on the 20th of February. These incursions are still occurring. What are we doing about it? Because, as we say, we're both allies together. Sooner or later, there will be an incident in relation to this in which there will be lives lost. And I make that emphasis to you. My time is up, but I do ask the Minister, when she comes back, in the light of the reply to my written question on the 20th February, what are we doing about these incursions, because they are still carrying on. Surely we have a right to protect not only our interests, but the interests of Gibraltar and Gibraltarians who want to remain British.
To thank the Noble Lady for tabling this evening's debate and for a speech in which all of her experience was brought to bear in a characteristically incisive and robust style. Now, I should make it clear at the outset that I'm not an expert in Gibraltar, but last year, as the serious damage that was being done by the level of Spanish border checks became clear, there was one aspect in which the situation reminded me of somewhere I do know very well, at the other end of the Mediterranean, the island of Cyprus. Because it seems to me that in both cases, the historic legacy is causing monumental problems for citizens today, and these citizens are not receiving adequate support from the institutions which ought to be protecting them. The people of Gibraltar are UK citizens and have been for 300 years. And whilst the bilateral relationship between the UK and Spain is paramount, Gibraltarians have another citizenship as members of the European Union, and it's on that I wish to focus my remarks. It seems to me an irony that whilst the EU has become increasingly active in the diplomatic field as a result of the creation of the External Action Service, it has not been sufficiently active in resolving tensions within the EU itself, as Cyprus and Gibraltar graphically demonstrate. And I wonder, slightly tongue-in-cheek, whether they ought to have an internal action service. A recent report on enlargement from the House of Lords EU Select Committee noted that when countries join the Union without prior resolution of bilateral disputes, it results in the import of those disputes into everyday decision-making of the EU. We see that constantly with Gibraltar and Cyprus, and I fear that Serbia and Kosovo may be coming down the track. There's an inconsistency at the heart of the Commission's approach to these situations. On the one hand, they quite rightly don't get involved in sovereignty disputes, but on the other, I don't believe that they always uphold EU legislation in a neutral way. Despite the agreement made in Cordoba in 2006, for example, recent EU passenger rights legislation excluded Gibraltar. The result of this would have been not only Gibraltarians, but any EU citizen passing through the airport would not have benefited from the passenger rights. Now, the European Parliament has subsequently accepted an amendment which was tabled by Liberal Democrat MEP Graham Watson, which has remedied this. This is now coming to the Council, and I do hope that the Minister is able to say today that they will fight very hard to keep that in. On Wednesday of this week, there will be further votes at the European Parliament plenary on the same set of issues. Only this time it's about the Safer Skies initiative, the air traffic control. Amendments tabled by the Spanish centre-right party at the Transport Committee have succeeded in removing Gibraltar from this legislation, which is disgraceful. So we now have to hope that the Parliament will overcome that and put Gibraltar back in. So I'd like an assurance from the Minister that the government is doing everything that they can. I do believe that the Commission needs to take its roles much more seriously. After years of problems with the Spanish authorities carrying out border checks, the escalation of the problem last autumn has meant that the Commission really can't continue to turn a blind eye to it. Now, I'm surprised that the conclusion of their investigation was that no EU law had been breached. It seems to me a strange interpretation of free movement. Perhaps future visits should be unannounced and incognito so that the real picture emerges. It was disgraceful that neither the Commission nor the Spanish government were prepared to publish the conclusions that had been reached. It took an official access to documents request by Graham Watson to ascertain that the Commission had described the intensity of these border checks as, quote, unjustifiable. So I'd ask the Noble Lady, the Minister, to outline what steps the British government are taking with the Commission to ensure that the rights of the citizens of Gibraltar will be upheld. What we really need is a lasting settlement to stop these incursions. So there's one other potential course of action regarding the border, which I wonder if the Minister might consider. Is it possible to create a legal position where Gibraltar, alone from the rest of the UK, could join the Schengen Agreement? If this could be done for Gibraltar, then the border crossings could be removed. And it's been done in reverse, so to speak, in that there are islands which are part of France which have been excluded from Schengen. As both Britain and Spain are members of NATO, I too would be interested in hearing whether or not the incursions of the Navy into Gibraltarian waters has been discussed. The European Commission President Barroso recently said the free movement of people is a fundamental principle of Europe and of the treaties and is one of the core elements that distinguish our union. The principle of free movement exists and is applicable throughout the Union without discrimination because we do not want a Europe of first-class and second-class citizens. Well, he's quite right to say that, but what he's got to now do is act on that with regard to Gibraltar.
My Lords, I had the very great privilege of being Governor and Commander-in-Chief of Gibraltar in the late 90s. And I want to thank my noble friend, Lady Butler-Sloss, for introducing this important debate and at this time. Of course, we all want good relations with Spain. Bilateral relations are important. They're partners in the European Union, they're partners in NATO. There's one other responsibility that we also share. We're both former imperial nations, and we've both inherited responsibilities to certain territories which have decided they wish to keep their link with their former imperial power. In the case of Spain, it's Melilla and Ceuta. In the case of Britain, examples like the Falklands, Bermuda, and Gibraltar. And Spain needs to understand that and respect that fact. I believe that relations between the Spanish government and Gibraltar and our country are worse than at any time since the time when Franco was in power. And that is damaging to our relations with Spain. And it's in sharp contrast to the last Spanish government that had a very sensible policy about regional cooperation in that area. This Spanish government's record of incursions, border harassment, ending negotiating process, undermining Gibraltar's participation in EU directives, generating an atmosphere of hatred in Andalusia towards Gibraltarians, accusations, false accusations of smuggling, money laundering and so on, are behaving more like Franquists than Democrats in Spain. Why do they do this? Well, as Lord Patton rightly said, we've seen this elsewhere in the Argentine, it's simply a diversion from their economy, from the corruption cases that they have, from youth unemployment of over 50%, and of the separatist movements that they have in that country. If they wanted to win Gibraltar over, they wouldn't exactly be bullying them in the way they are at present. And who suffers? Not just Gibraltarians, but all the Spaniards in that region. As Gibraltar in these circumstances have withstood this pressure enormously well, with a growth rate last year of 8%, but is asking an awful lot of them. Now, my lords, I think the British government, their words of support have been robust, but their deeds don't match their words. And my experience as a former governor, and following a recent visit in the autumn, is that we give the wrong signals to Spain. Spain thinks that by bullying they can erode our position in Gibraltar. But psychologically, this government, for a long period of time, doesn't matter what colour it is, has felt that they should be timid for fear of upsetting the Spanish. Now, I'm not convinced that this government is giving the kind of defence support that has been asked for by successive governors and commanders of British forces. I understand, for example, that a fishery protection vessel was asked for and has not been given. This was some 2 or 3 years ago. I do understand that the British government have increased the number of crews to support the patrol ships to enable them to be more active. But I ask the Minister, are we now able to defend the British Gibraltar territorial waters day and night every week if we need to? And will the Minister assure the House that we are providing the naval resources which are required to uphold our sovereignty? It is absolutely crucial for the people of Gibraltar to know this. Secondly, on the border, as others have referred to this, it is important to have a report from the Minister about the progress that is being made by the European Monitoring Commission. The Gibraltar government, we know, have immediately acted on one recommendation, which is to tighten up on tobacco regulation. The Spanish government were asked to end random inspections of vehicles on the border and introduce risk profiling and make more space for the faster flow of traffic. What progress has been made in the last 6 months? And if none has been made, will the government ask the Commission to do a return visit to take follow-up action? On the diplomatic side, we must be more robust and immediately respond and protest when incursions are made. On fishing, I'm glad to note that the Gibraltar government has introduced new legislation to do with conservation and proper regulation. On the dialogue side, the Foreign Secretary, quite rightly, proposed ad hoc talks. What is the Spanish reaction? I've heard nothing from Spain on this issue. What is the Spanish reaction? On the European Union, others have made many references to that. But we must fight our corner in terms of efforts by Spain to exclude Gibraltar from EU directives like those on aviation. In short, my lords, firstly, we must defend Gibraltarians by giving full support to our Governor, Sir James Dutton, and our excellent Chief Minister, Fabian Picardo. Secondly, we must make sure Spain understands our determination. And thirdly, we must work to persuade the Spanish government that by returning to the previous policy of regional cooperation, the Spanish people, as well as the Gibraltarians, will benefit from this, and Anglo-Spanish relations will improve.
My Lords, it's a great pleasure to be able to join in this debate so brilliantly and comprehensively opened by the Noble Baroness, Lady Butler-Sloss. For those of us who have campaigned on behalf of Gibraltar in your Lordship's house over the years, and I'm thinking nostalgically of my late noble friends, the Lord Boyd Carpenter, Lord Bethel, and Lord Merivale in particular, as well as others who have participated in the debate this evening. It's always good to have an injection of new blood, as it were, and the Noble Baroness speaks with great authority from her own personal experience and involvement in Gibraltar. My Lords, I'm a member of the All-Party Group for Gibraltar, and I'm also president of the Friends of Gibraltar, which operates outside Parliament. But I'm also a member of the All-Party Group for Spain, and I find nothing incompatible with that, as I have many friends in Spain and go there often. I suspect that's true of others here this evening, and it's certainly true of many of my friends in Gibraltar, many of whom have close links with Spain, and some of whom also have homes in Spain. Given that the people of Gibraltar have made their views clear in the referendum, and given that the British government has equally made it clear that they will not do anything against the wishes of the people of Gibraltar, it does seem perverse of the Spanish government to take actions now that further antagonize Gibraltarians rather than seeking to win hearts and minds. But that is why I welcome the initiative coming from the people of Gibraltar together with their neighbours in the Campo. They have, as I understand it, formed a cross-frontier group composed of business representatives and union activists from both sides of the border. And I understand that their visit to Brussels at the end of February to protest at the illegal and disproportionate queues at the frontier had considerable impact on members of the European Parliament, on commissioners, and indeed on other Commission officials, as well as on the media. Can my noble friend, the Minister, comment on this development and the ways in which it can continue to present evidence to relevant groups and Commission bodies? Is this being encouraged by our government? And can she say how this ties in with the recent visits made by the Chief Minister to both Brussels and to Strasbourg? He, as ever, being assiduous and articulate in making the case, the best possible case for Gibraltar. But most of all, can she tell us what the follow-up to the visit made by the European Union team of experts last September, which has already been referred to, I think, by every person speaking in this debate, which inspected the problem on the spot, made recommendations to ease the border restrictions, and since then, nothing seems to have been heard. Is there any evidence that Spain has complied with these recommendations? How is it being monitored by the European Union itself or by HMG? And what more can the government do in this respect? I think the noble Lord Luce spelled out the course of action that the British government can take on this and many other issues far better than I can. And indeed, the many other issues affecting Gibraltar have also been covered very well in the course of this debate, so I won't repeat. But, my lords, the present impasse on the border is a sad, unnecessary, and incomprehensible state of affairs, and it's gone on for far too long. I can only hope that the patience of the good people of Gibraltar will last. I have a feeling that it will, and that they'll continue to prosper in spite of it.
My Lords, can I thank Baroness Butler-Sloss for introducing the debate tonight. Now, whether we like it or not, the Spanish insistence on their right over Gibraltar territory is not new and is not likely to change. Before Christmas, as many noble lords have indicated, there was a significant increase in the volume of noise emitted by Spain in relation to its ongoing claim over the island of Gibraltar. Now, ever since the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, Gibraltar has been associated with the UK, but Spain has never given up its rights over the land. And since that time, tension between the UK and Spain over Gibraltar has blown hot and cold. But what has become clear, as Noble Lord Patten suggested, is that there is a direct correlation, it seems, between Spain's appetite to turn up the heat on its claim over the island, which seems to coincide directly with difficult situation which the Spanish government are experiencing domestically. Seeking an outside distraction is the oldest trick in the book when your government is up against internal difficulties. And the difficulties are evident. In January, official Spanish statistics confirmed that the country's unemployment rate has risen to above 26%, with a total number of unemployed now at 5.9 million. With austerity measures continuing and corruption scandals being exposed, in addition to a move to restrict abortion, it's no wonder that Spain's ruling Partido Popular has lost its lead in the opinion polls to the Spanish socialists. Maybe that's what this is all about. But this sabre-rattling is not the way to resolve international conflicts, nor to distract from your internal problems. It should be made absolutely clear that Spain can't advance its position on sovereignty by unlawful incursions, breaking diplomatic conventions and other aggressive methods and manoeuvres. The UK should respect the rights of the 30,000 Gibraltarians who time and again, and most recently in referendums in 1967 and 2002, have maintained their preference for retaining their particular relationship with the UK. In the year 2000, a political declaration of unity was signed by all living, present and past members of the Gibraltar Parliament. In essence, the declaration stated that the people of Gibraltar will never compromise, give up or trade their sovereignty or their right to self-determination. It stated that Gibraltar wants good, neighbourly European relations with Spain, and that Gibraltar belongs to the people of Gibraltar and is neither Spain's to claim nor Britain's to give away. Unilateral threats are not the way to sort out problems. And of course, Spain is aware of the sensitivities of an issue like Gibraltar, where there's an historic claim to land adjacent to another country. Ceuta and Melilla has been mentioned before. They're enclaves that Spain have in the north of Morocco, over which Morocco claims sovereignty rights. Isn't it interesting that those striking similarity between Spain's relationship with Ceuta and Melilla and the UK's with Gibraltar? Both the military and naval bases, dominated by fortified mountains, both contain populations which are racially mixed but united in their fervent loyalty to a crown and a country whose capital lies hundreds of miles away. But keeping a strong relationship with Spain is imperative. Spain is one of our strongest allies, both in the EU and in NATO. There are 1 million British people living there, and 14 million citizens from the UK visit the country every year. I know from my time in the European Parliament that Spain was an ally that we could rely on a number of crucial issues of common interest in the European Union. But the UK must not be bullied. Illegal incursions into British Gibraltar territorial waters are not uncommon, and they have been increasing of late. Almost 500 in 2013 and over 77 so far this year. Can the noble lady, the Minister, state whether the Spanish ambassador has been summoned to account for its incursions into Gibraltar waters this year? Could she indicate when was the last time a UK government minister had direct contact with a Spanish government minister on this issue, and when was the last time a minister visited Gibraltar in an official capacity? Can the noble lady, the Minister, elaborate on whether there are any signs of a positive response from the Spanish government? Shadow Minister for Europe, Gareth Thomas, and my noble friend Lord West have recently asked the Foreign Secretary whether he would consider reinforcing the Gibraltar garrison, in particular its maritime security capability. Could the noble lady, the Minister, give an indication as to whether this has been done? And could the noble Minister update the House on the latest situation on the delays at the border, including whether Spain has responded to the recommendations by the Commission? We don't know what the recommendations are, so has the UK government had any luck in persuading the Commission to share that correspondence that they've had with the Spanish government on this issue? Now, the Spanish government pulled out of the trilateral forum in 2011. Does the Minister see any sign of the Spanish accepting the need to return once again to the use of that sensible diplomatic channel for discussions? And the Spanish, can she explain what the Spanish government's response is to the reiteration of the proposals by the Secretary of State for ad hoc talks involving all relevant parties?
My Lords, I thank the noble and learned Baroness Lady Butler-Sloss for securing this debate and for the comprehensive way in which she outlined the very many challenges that the Government of Gibraltar face. And I'll try and deal with some of her very specific questions. Can I also thank all noble lords for their contributions, and especially the noble Lord Luce, whose expertise and opinion on this matter I hugely respect. My Lords, recent months have seen a number of unhelpful further moves by Spain to advance its claim towards Gibraltar, in particular incursions into British Gibraltar territorial waters and the introduction of unreasonable and illegal delays at the border. However, the position of the British government is unequivocal. Gibraltar and its waters are sovereign British territory. They will remain so for as long as the people of the island wish them to be, and we will continue to respond robustly, taking whatever action is necessary to safeguard Gibraltar, its people and its economy. I thank the noble Baroness Lady Morgan for her outline of the situation. Our position on the sovereignty of Gibraltar is clear and is unchanged. We will protect the right of the people of Gibraltar to determine their political future, and the UK will never enter into arrangements under which the people of Gibraltar would pass under the sovereignty of another state against their wishes. And furthermore, the UK will not enter into any process of sovereignty negotiations with which Gibraltar is not content. I hope those comments are clear and unequivocal. My Lords, Gibraltar's constitution reflects the principle that all peoples have the right of self-determination. The realisation of this right must be promoted and respected in conformity with the provisions of the Charter of the United Nations and any other applicable international treaties. And I can assure the noble Lord Luce that the British government is confident of UK sovereignty of the whole of Gibraltar, including British Gibraltar territorial waters. The noble and learned Baroness Lady Butler-Sloss, indeed other noble lords, asked about what action had been taken and whether that action could have been stronger. We have, my lords, taken robust action. The Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary have called their Spanish counterparts, and we've summoned the Spanish Ambassador on a number of occasions. We have made our concerns very clear and have acted in close concert with the Government of Gibraltar. We are strongly committed to a diplomatic solution, and we don't believe that tit-for-tat escalation is in anybody's interests. For example, incursions by the Guardia Civil, which involve photography, filming and circling of ships, have been provocative actions, and the United Kingdom has raised these at the highest level with the Spanish government. And indeed, the Prime Minister raised the issue, for example, of border delays with President Barroso in August last year, which led to the Commission sending a border monitoring mission in September. And the Prime Minister raised our concerns again with Barroso in December last year. A number of noble lords, including my noble friend Baroness Scott, asked about EU aviation legislation. We cannot accept a return to the pre-2006 practice of suspending Gibraltar Airport from EU aviation measures. We've raised this with the Spanish government and the European Commission, and we believe that the EU treaties are clear that Gibraltar should be included in EU aviation legislation, and we've made our position on this clear to the Spanish government and the Commission. And officials are working with UK MEPs' officers to ensure that amendments in upcoming EU aviation legislation that would seek to suspend the application to Gibraltar Airport are properly responded to. The noble Lord Luce asked about position of the Royal Navy. Under the Gibraltar Constitution, the Royal Gibraltar Police is tasked with the enforcement of Gibraltar law in British Gibraltar territorial waters. The main tasks of the Royal Navy Gibraltar Squadron are to protect visiting warships and to uphold British sovereignty against unlawful incursions by the state vessels such as the Spanish Guardia Civil. Differences with Spain concerning the waters should be resolved, we believe, by diplomatic and political means, not naval confrontation. And continued escalation, we believe, is in no one's interest. And when I say that in terms of de-escalation of a matter, it's in no way stepping back from our commitment to the...
May I just pass on one piece of experience in my time? At that time, there was a serious fishing dispute, and there were a large number of incursions. And it drifted and got worse and worse. And it was only when, at the last moment, a Spanish vessel was arrested, detained, and the 14 people, Spanish people on board were arrested, that the dispute was brought to an end. And all I'm asking for is robust defence of our sovereignty in those waters.
The Noble Lord makes an incredibly important point, and in response to the increased number of maritime incursions, the Ministry of Defence have deployed additional personnel to Gibraltar to enhance the response capability and the resilience of the Royal Navy Gibraltar Squadron. Royal Navy ships will continue to visit Gibraltar regularly in relation to operational and training activity, reflecting its utility as a permanent joint operating base. All elements of the situation, including the maritime security capabilities available to the Royal Navy Gibraltar Squadron, are kept under review, and should it be necessary, the Ministry of Defence will provide additional assets to the squadron or augment our broader maritime posture as is necessary. This is an issue I think that was raised by the Noble Baroness Lady Morgan as well. My noble friend Lady Hooper is right that the border delays are unacceptable and indeed damaging to both the government of Gibraltar and indeed to Spain. The Commission's letter to Spain following its border mission last September made clear that the intensity of Spanish checks were unjustified. The Commission made recommendations to both sides to improve the flow of people and traffic, and we remain confident that Spain has acted and continues to act unlawfully, and we're continuing to provide evidence of that to the Commission. The Commission has undertaken to review the situation every 6 months following its border mission. That is at the end of this month, and we continue to provide the Commission with details of continuing border delays in preparation of that review. My noble friend Lord Patton raised specifically the opening of the diplomatic bag. We did indeed summon the Spanish ambassador and subsequently received assurances that it would not happen again, and my lords, to date it has not. The noble and learned Baroness Lady Butler Sloss asked about ministerial visits, as indeed did a number of other noble lords. There have been several ministerial visits to Gibraltar since 2010, and the last one was in December of last year when the Minister for Armed Forces visited. And of course their Royal Highnesses, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, paid a highly successful visit to Gibraltar in 2012, and those visits will continue. I hear what my noble friend Lord Patton had to say in his description of Spain's behaviour, but I think as the noble Baroness, as a front bench opposite, has also said, Spain is of course still a valued partner in both NATO and the EU, and it is in the interest of both our countries and indeed in the interest of Gibraltar for that cooperation to continue. Spain says that it has an excellent relationship with the UK, however it's difficult to see how Spain's escalation of the dispute over Gibraltar is not going to impact on that wider bilateral relationship. That is a point that we have made to them on numerous occasions, and will continue to pursue solutions at this stage through political and diplomatic means. But there should be no doubt of our commitment to the people of Gibraltar. Their wishes and their rights are paramount, and we will continue to stand up for them. To achieve a solution, it is our long-term aim, shared also by the Government of Gibraltar, to return to the trilateral forum, which was referred to by the Noble Baroness, for which the current Spanish government withdrew upon taking office in December of 2011. In the interim, we've reiterated to the Spanish government the Foreign Secretary's proposal that he made in April of 2012 for ad hoc talks involving all relevant parties. And we welcome the interest that was shown in that proposal and urge all parties to meet around the negotiating table and engage in constructive dialogue. My Lords, during this debate we've heard a number of politically motivated actions taken by Spain to try and pressurise Britain and Gibraltar, and we've also heard that the government has taken robust action in response, and we will continue to do so. But we are also committed to trying to tackle the underlying tensions through a process of dialogue that will give the people of Gibraltar a voice. My Lords, as we enter negotiations, it is particularly important that all sides are seen to be taking positive actions. We welcome the decision by the European Commission to send a border monitoring mission to Gibraltar in September of last year, but these missions will only be successful if the follow-up work, for example the implementation in the recommendations that were made by the mission, are followed through in the same way as the government of Gibraltar is doing. At the heart of this issue, my Lords, is the right of the people of Gibraltar to determine their own future. The current constitution of Gibraltar already includes the assurance that the UK will never enter into arrangements under which the people of Gibraltar would pass under the sovereignty of another state against their wishes. Furthermore, this government has repeated the assurances given by the previous government that the UK will not enter into a process of sovereignty negotiations with which Gibraltar is not content. For as long as the people of Gibraltar wish to retain British sovereignty, we will continue to work with their elected representatives to ensure they can pursue their legitimate interests unhindered by unreasonable and illegal actions by any nation, but of course most recently by Spain. However, it is also clear that cooperation between Gibraltar and Spain offers many benefits to people on both sides of the border. Fostering that cooperation, my Lords, remains in everyone's interest, and with the support of the Government of Gibraltar remains our long-term aim too.
Sits down. I wonder if she could just take away the question of bunkering, which he hasn't dealt with, which I, unfortunately, for lack of time, did not really explain. But the threat by Spain is to fine and punish by prosecution any of the big four groups who actually have their bunker supplies in Gibraltar waters. They are not suggesting fining, of course, in Algeciras, where they also have facilities, but they are saying they will fine and they will prosecute any of those who actually get their bunkering supplies in Gibraltar. What is the government going to do about that? Because it's going to put off the four major companies, if we're not careful, from actually using the bunker facilities in Gibraltar.
It is something that I will certainly take back, and I will write to the noble lady and put a copy of the letter in the library.
My Lords, we have a little time in hand. May I propose that the House adjourn during pleasure until 2034?
The House do now adjourn during pleasure until